Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Tearing It Up podcast. Before we get into the full conversation here, I have to let you guys know that my chat with Keree Smith just barely scratches the surface of what she's up to. We talk about her seasonal rhythm from skiing big lines in the winter to captaining her own boat in the summer. But we didn't get to everything, like the fact that she's a heli guide for Black Ops Valdez and she skis for Forefront and some of her favorites, Wild Rye. She's a total badass who carved her own path, and here's just a piece of her story. We're going to have a fun conversation today. We get to talk about something that's pretty near and dear to my heart, but we actually don't talk about that much on the podcast. It's surprising to me that we haven't had more guests kind of in this industry, or I haven't talked about my experience at all up in Alaska much. If those of you who've been longtime listeners or, have known me from outside the podcast may know a little bit about it. But today we're diving in with Keree Smith about her very seasonal life, one spent in the mountains and on the ocean. So, Keree, will you tell the people where you are today as we are recording?
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me. It's fun getting to connect. And I am currently at my cabin up in Alaska. It's on the interior side of Thompson Pass in the Chugach Mountains. And I came here for skiing, but kind of my roots started on Mount Hood. I grew up in a really small town called Government Camp,
Mhm.
right on the pass up there. And for anybody who is in the ski world or knows Govy, it's pretty small. There's not much else to do there besides ski. And my parents grew up instructing and ski patrolling, and I quickly became part of that as part of my childhood.
I love it. Anyone listening from the Northwest who's been skiing or snowboarding for a while, I'm sure has made a trip to Govy and Hood in the springtime as they were the ones open, like, all through summer pretty much, right, for a long time, running camps and whatnot as long as they could.
Yeah, I loved growing up there. I mean, it's kind of wild, right? When I was a really little kid, you're not really part of the scene, like the Gubby scene, but just getting into high school, ski racing became a really large part of my life, and I inevitably ended up working up on the hill, like, kinda starting at the age of 14 or so, being a salt bitch, throwing salt on the race courses, and then just running wild on the streets of Government Camp with all the gypsy kids, uh, in the off time, and yeah, I developed a real love for skiing, like, I really did freaking love it, and racing was tough, it was a love-hate relationship, I'd say, for maybe people who have grown up in the ski race world can, understand or relate to that. But, yeah, I do think that it set me up to have this really deep love for the mountains and the mountain community and just that lifestyle, and it's something that I've ended up chasing throughout my entire life, or structuring my entire life around, really.
I definitely have heard some stories from those who have, like, race backgrounds, and also it's always interesting to me to find out the transition, going from pretty strict, rigid race and competitive to, what's become, like, a whole other more popular, at least around the people I hang out with, the, like, freeride, like, big mountain, like, riding and skiing and whatnot. So when did you start to kinda make that transition from racing and competing into just doing more of your own thing, bigger mountain and whatnot?
I was one of the race kids who always was free skiing, like, missed the award ceremony because you're out taking powder laps with your friends. Um, so I've just always, yeah, had that deep love for skiing, and I think anybody who has that as a kid, right, like, number 1, you always wanted to make it to the Olympics, but number 2, you saw all Alaska, like, you saw the big lines in Alaska, and I think it's kind of like timeless inspiration, um, just passes back generations, and so, yeah, seeing the Alaska lines, I was like, "Wow, I wanna be able to do that someday, and that really pulled me towards being in a big mountain scene. I didn't have a pair of skis that was wider than, like, 70 something underfoot. Like, I mean, I just had race skis until
Yeah.
out I moved out to Utah, to take a, gap year or whatnot after my racing career, I guess you could say. Sounds funny, but, after that had ended for me, and I literally had race skis with me. I didn't own a pair of powder skis, and so, like, this transition to big mountain skiing, backcountry skiing, was later in life for me. Like, I didn't my parents didn't backcountry ski growing up. It's not something I actually never backcountry skied on Mount Hood. Like, the first place I learned backcountry ski was in Utah, at the age of 22. So it's funny that transition, I didn't grow up with that as part of my life, but yeah.
Well, I think that's, probably I mean, I don't know exactly how old you are, but it has become a lot more popularized, backcountry skiing in the recent years, 10 years plus maybe 15 and whatnot, and especially when you live somewhere like Mount Hood where the access is just there too, that I feel like, well, you don't really have to. Obviously, people enjoy different things and whatnot, but I just feel like it wasn't as prominent anyways as it is now. So coming into it a little bit later and especially going somewhere like Utah and just being around a different of people, different mountains, then there's just an idea maybe of more wanting to explore more, but maybe you don't have that same thing at home sometimes. Cause I mean, I think about the silliest things where being from the Northwest and the Seattle area of, like, the things I've never done, like, I've never been to the top of the Space Needle, you know? That it's like, when you are live somewhere and you don't do these things that people actually come to that destination for sometimes it's a funny kind of, like, polarization, I guess.
No, totally, and it is funny, like, I mean, this is a little bit of a different example, but, growing up, there's this famous, restaurant called Huckleberry Inn, and they make these huckleberry milkshakes. I didn't have a huckleberry milkshake till I was, like, 13 because
Yeah.
we just didn't eat out as a kid? But no, definitely the didn't do it until you're moved away almost,
Y
right, is the thing, and
Yep.
but no, I mean, Utah, like, totally completely opened my world. I remember being up across from Snowbird out in the backcountry for the very first time and just being mind blown, like, "Wow, this is what I could be doing," and it completely opened up terrain and thinking about how to travel and be in the mountains, and I very quickly fell in love with it. I guess I to kind of fill you in on a little bit more of my story, the reason I got into backcountry skiing is because I had a huge major accident. I competed in a thing called Arctic Man up in Alaska, which is like a hybrid downhill ski race with a snow machine component where you get towed behind a snow machine.
Wow.
So you're going like yeah, you're I'm gonna make this quick because it's can be a story in itself, but you're going very quickly behind this snow machine. This is sort of my transition from racing to backcountry skiing. I did very well the first year, and then the second year went back and in the training round had a huge wreck, and I blew up both my knees. So I tore both my ACLs at the same time, LCL, PCL, MCL,
Oh my
and
god.
bucket handle tear in my left meniscus. Yeah, I was just really messed up, and this is when I was 19. So, I hadn't backcountry skied before this, but a 6 knee surgeries later and a year and a half, um, time off, and when I came back, I was like, "Alright, I can't pound the resort anymore, like, I
Mhm.
need to figure something else out," and that's how I learned to backcountry ski. So to wrap your question up
Yeah.
there, my backcountry skiing came as a bit of a mandatory adaptation, necessary
Yeah.
adaptation to my circumstances, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Backcountry skiing has brought me all over the world, Iceland, Svalbard, Japan, Alaska, and I love it for what it is. I can't say that I'm the most competitive, you know, I can't jump off 30-foot cliffs anymore, really, safely and feel good about it, but yeah, it's been a beautiful journey, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
That's wild. I mean, just full 2 blown up knees at the same time. I mean, during that time period, did you have a lot of kind of, like, identity type crisis? So we've talked to a few athletes or folks who, I've seen this transition a lot from skiers into, like, mountain biking, and how they got into biking was from an injury, like, they were hurt, and so they hopped on a bike to rehab or whatever, and then just fell in love with whatever kind of cycling it might be for them, through that process, that healing process and whatnot, much like your story from, like, competitive racing or just resort riding. It can be a lot harder on the joints on groomers and hardpack than obviously, like, out there in the backcountry. But yeah, before you made that move to Utah and you're at home and healing, what was that time period like for you and wondering, like, what was next for yourself in life?
Well, little timeline correction, I had actually spent 2 seasons or a season in Utah before I had
Okay.
this huge accident, and so I had already tasted the
I
like,
see.
free ride, big mountain, like, I had gotten a big pair of skis, and I was like, "Wow." And skied Utah powder, which if you come from the Pacific Northwest, you're like, "Oh, man, I can't really ski powder, it's not, like, that fun." And then you go to Utah and you're like, "Whoa, this is what I've been missing." Um, I wanna I think that I was young enough, I still had a little bit of, like, an invincibility bug in me, and I just saw it as, like, a small gap in, what I was gonna do, like, I yeah, I guess being young, I felt more invincible and that it wasn't such a major blow to my identity. Like, I was pretty sure I was gonna be able to get back, even though there were
Mhm.
some terrible times where I was in, like, 2 straight leg braces and
Oh.
hand crutches for 3 months, But, yeah, no, I guess I feel lucky that I came out of
Yeah.
that.
Well, that's awesome, and I mean, like you said, I wish a lot of times that I still had some of that younger, like, invincibility mentality, right? That you
Yeah.
don't get in your head too much and you're like, "Oh, this is fine. This is just a hurdle. We'll overcome it." And especially since you had already had some experience with the big mountains, that it wasn't just going straight from, like, "I only know ski racing and competitiveness, and now what do
Yeah.
I do next?" So that, I'm
Yeah,
sure, changed a
well,
lot of things.
maybe the biggest transition was going from, right, I competitive ski raced, and then I did get just lightly involved in, like, some of the freeride world tour stuff. I actually was a forerunner at one event, and then they,
Oh,
like, let me
wow.
in as a wild card. But, so that for me was a transition, like, if I had not had that accident, I think I could have very likely gone into more of a competitive big mountain circuit, and that sort of was taken off the table for me, and so instead of continuing this competitive outline of my life, I really transitioned to embracing backcountry skiing and traveling and seeing the world and doing, yeah, just more of that style than letting go of the competitiveness, being like, "Alright, my
Yeah.
body is not gonna do this anymore."
That's what I think of really as, like, free skiing, right? It was, like, really, like, no, just doing it for the fun, the soul of it, all of that, and, that does mean something, and we're in such a interesting time. I mean, it's still transitioning, but the fact that you can kinda make a living, like, not being competitive, right? I mean, that's where films were coming from, like, when before there was a lot of competitiveness, and it's still one of those things, like, it's big mountain skiing and snowboarding's not in the Olympics, and going on the Freeride World Tour is more costly for people most people than, like, rewarding for money or sponsorships, like, all that stuff is not the same
Yeah.
as it was early on with, the time period that snowboarding and skiing went through just massive changes with sponsorships and a lot of money. That's died down, but now, like I said, you do see people making a living, without having that competitive side of things through many different aspects, whether it's sponsorships. Like, I talked with Amy Engerbretson, and she, has, like, in the creative way, not like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
people like to say, especially for women, like the influencer skier or whatever, like, but she is still a professional skier, right? But people sometimes look at it in a different light, because of how the money is made or whatnot. But there's just so many different avenues, and that, I'm curious how you went from finding backcountry skiing, like, getting into backcountry skiing just for that, the vibe, the traveling, the loving all the energy about it, and found this lifestyle where you can enables you to do that, and also make money, whether that's elsewhere or through, I don't know if you have,
Yeah.
sponsorships too that help you in the winter or what?
Well, I was gonna say, for the very few handful of people who can make a living doing ski stuff, I think that's amazing, but it is really important to add in there that I would say most people, like the majority of the population, is not just making a living off of their sponsorship money.
Yeah.
Like
Like
most like, let's just get rid of that, um, you know, conception there because I think it is really hard for people to be like, "Oh, yeah, you can just make a living being a professional big mountain skier," and a very few people do it, and it's
Mhm.
incredible, and they're very talented and business oriented as well, but I would say and I would fall into the second category, I did not see that I was going to be able to make a living.
Yeah.
And so I was like, "All right, well, I still want this to be an integral part of my life. I love it. Um, but I don't really see myself being able to make a living and have a house and, like, have stability in away from getting money from sponsors."
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people would say that. So, I fall into the second category, which is I was like, "I gotta figure out what I can do for work seasonally that's gonna make me a lot of money really fast so that I can take a lot of time off." And I had a friend who introduced me to commercial fishing back when I was in my early 20s, and the first time I went up there, I was like, "This is it. I fucking love this." And I had never seen m you know, commercial fishing is an extremely volatile industry. There's a lot of money that moves around. It you make it and you quickly spend it, but I
Yeah.
had never seen money I had never seen money move around like that. My mom was a elementary school teacher, and my dad ran the wastewater treatment plant in town, and I went up there, and I had never seen people spend $10,000 in a day for a pump, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, "Wow, this is it." Like, this is a lot of money really fast, little do you know that it disappears very quickly too, but, um, so yeah, I decided that I I went up and fished for a few seasons, um, and knew that that's what I was gonna do. I was gonna get a boat someday and be able to run my own operation, and, the goal being that I could take winters off or make my own schedule, and be able to make it that way.
Yeah. Where did you go up in Alaska, and what kind of fishing were you doing, or that did you first get introduced to?
Okay, so I was introduced to Bristol Bay, which if you are thinking about a map of Alaska, you see the big Aleutian Island Peninsula, and it's just north of there. So it's the Bering Sea. It's where they do all the crab shows. But we're a little closer to land typically, and I'm in a gillnet fishery. So Bristol Bay is the world's largest sockeye salmon fishery, wild sockeye salmon fishery, and it's It's an amazing, incredible place where it's far enough removed from bridges, dams, infrastructure. It was one of the last fisheries to get motorized vessels, right? So it has been able to remain sustainable and like really keep its abundance throughout the years. And the fishery has naturally gone through a lot of fluctuations in return and stock, but in general, it's a poster child for this sustainability model, for fisheries around the world, and I can't say enough about it. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. Well, being in the Northwest area, I mean, obviously Mount Hood's not like on the coast or anything, and neither was Tacoma, Washington, but we had the Puget Sound, and I grew up like sport fishing there. Did you have any connection with fishing at all through just you growing up or your family or anything before going up to Alaska, or was everything about this foreign and brand new?
I had never been on a boat in the ocean before I went up to do my first season commercial fishing. I mean, I was like they say that you're green when you go up, for the
Mhm.
first time, and I was green. I mean, I didn't know what a gillnet was, like, and it's funny, I remember my crewmate, this poor old guy, Vic, Kramer, who was an amazing just first mentor on the boat, who was our skipper. The other kid was like there's these bags that we put fish in after you catch them, and the kid was like, "So do we, like, tow these behind the boat and catch the fish like that?" And the guy is like, "Oh my god, like, what did I get myself into?" We just knew absolutely nothing, didn't even know what a gillnet was. For anybody who also doesn't know what a gillnet is, it is a net that it's a very long net that goes out behind the boat, and the fish run into it, and it catches them on their gills. So, we reel the net back in on, like, a big hydraulic drum or fishing reel, you can think of it, and then the crew's job is to pick every single fish out of the net individually. And this is different from seining or purse seining, which a lot of people I think are more familiar with, which is where the
Mhm.
net circles the fish and then brings them on the boat. So yeah, gill netting is much more hands-on with each and every fish. We bleed the fish and put them in refrigerated water. Uh, but yeah, that anyways, I knew nothing.
Yeah. You
Getting
did
back
not
to
know all
that,
this till you experienced
I
it.
didn't know any
So,
of it.
anyone listening is already one
Yeah,
step ahead of you if they're interested in
yes,
going up there.
exactly. I also got onto the boat, and for the first 6 hours, I puked every 15 minutes,
Oh
and
my god.
being seasick is the worst feeling ever. I mean, it's like having the worst hangover you've ever had in your entire life, and you just have to keep going because it's not going
Yeah.
to end until um, but yeah,
Was
no,
there th
I yeah, that was my intro to commercial fishing. My family didn't do it, I had no relations except for this one ski racer friend who was like, "Yeah, you should get up and try it."
Awesome. There's a lot of, or has been in the past, I don't know, a lot of my friends now have either gone one way or the other, but there was definitely a lot of people at one time, in Tahoe who were up there and here in the winter. So I feel like a lot of skiers can make that connection because exactly what you said, or like figuring out what will enable you to
Yeah,
ski a majority of the winter, and be okay financially, but obviously there's tons of other things that come into that and, well, how much money you make through the fishing season, what the fishing season's like, and then obviously what you do with that large chunk of change that comes at one time. Not a lot of people in our society are good at managing that. So one big chunk of money and it's like it can be gone very quickly, so you may not make it through an entire winter, especially depending on how long winter is or where you live and all the other variables that come along with that. Um, For a little context for, like, boat living, I mean, we'll dive into it further as we talk about how it has evolved for you on this first boat. It might be the same now. Was it just you, one other deckhand, and the captain?
Yeah, for the more majority of the season, it was 3 of us, and then a lot of so, yeah, a little overview of boats in Bristol Bay. There are a lot of regulations for the fishery that are put in place to maintain a entry level of competition, and by that, one of those things is every boat can only be 32 feet long. So, you imagine you're all living on a 32-foot boat. I'd say most boats have 2 full-time deckhands and get a third. You've started to have these huge jet boats in the fishery, people are always trying to get up on the edge and get around the kind of like entry level, fishing boats, but they might have up to 4 or 5 deckhands on. But my first boat, yeah, me, the skipper, one other deckhand, and then a lot of times you have a third person come for a peak position, but that's it, and you've never met these people a lot of times, and then you just go from never having met these people in your life to living together in a space that's about 10 feet, like, square.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah,
all in
maybe
bunks
yeah,
in this
maybe shitting in a
yeah.
bucket in front of them,
Yeah,
depending
yeah,
on your boat
a
situation.
lot of I don't have a toilet, a head on my boat, and we shit in the bucket,
Yeah.
so, no, it's very intimate, and you go into this high stress, high anxiety, high consequence environment, and then you also are, like, expected to chill together and eat together, and it's really intense, but there's just this beauty to it as well, right? You're kinda surrendering to, "All right, this is I can't get away from you, like, we
Mhm.
need to figure out how to deal," and that there's just a lot of great life lessons in
Yes.
that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that sometimes that's where we learn some of the best lessons is being forced into things that we have to figure out and challenge, right? Adversity. And
Yeah,
a lot of times these days, less and less people are being faced with any of that, right? And so our problem solving skills are like out the window or how to react against challenges or whatnot. But being that you spent the first 6 hours puking every 15 minutes and you're like, I'm sure getting
yeah.
just all this information, everything thrown at you. How did this go into, like, coming back year after year? What, it's been 10 years now or something like that for you?
This is actually gonna be my coming up on my 12th season, so summer of
Wow.
2026 will be my 12th season commercial fishing, and I know you asked or mentioned earlier, I'm 33, so I started when I was in my early 20s, 21-ish. Um, what kept me coming back? This was one of the things in life where you just know. You just know. I knew the very first year that I wanted to come back up here and have a boat. Um, Bristol Bay, it's a wild place. You're out in the ocean in the middle of nowhere. There's like no other reason anybody else is out there. There's not tourism. There's nobody like taking boat tours
Yeah.
out into the open ground. It's wild, and there are grizzly bears walking along the beach, seeing millions and millions of salmon come in. Just for context, because we're both from the Pacific Northwest, the Willamette River was just reopened for salmon runs, and it's been dammed and different things for many years. They had a return of like 700,000 fish, and that was really big. That was huge comeback. Bristol Bay in its biggest years has 80 million fish come
Holy
back. So, I mean, it is like it's like the great migration of fish. And sometimes, I mean, the water can be boiling with fish. Like, when the tide goes out and they're all kinda stuck up against a sandbar, it'll just look like literally bubbling water because of how many fish there are. And just seeing that, like, seeing nature just working and then being a part of that, your fishing schedule is entirely based on tides.
Mhm.
There's a lot of regulations when the fisheries open, so you just go into this zone where you are part of something much bigger, as cheesy as that sounds, right?
Yeah,
But
I love it.
you're working on a fully different you're operating on a completely different schedule than, like, our normal little human lives, and
Yep.
it's part of this return of this massive, incredible, fish return that happens every year, and so seeing that was huge, and then the other part was the camaraderie. I love fishermen. They are wild and feral and everybody comes from a very different background up in the fishing world. You know, you can have accountants from Las Vegas or school teachers or, and so getting to mesh, and you kind of touched on this earlier, like being forced to interact with people that aren't our normal people, right? Like, especially in a ski town, I think we're kinda soft in that we just get to interact with this we have the choice to interact with people who are very similar to us, which is great in a lot of ways, but I think it cuts out a lot of just we're missing out on a lot of diversity and getting to know other people, and appreciating the diversity in people, right? And so the fishery
Absolutely.
really brought that for me, and I loved that, and, um, yeah, so community and the wildness of it all.
So kind of, I guess, speaking about diversity, obviously this is a women's podcast, women's focused mission, like to get ladies out there doing things where maybe they don't feel like they've belonged before. And I know that like being up there and everything means a lot more to you than this, but maybe you can speak to a little bit about, like, being a fisherwoman up there, if you ran into any difficulties at all there, or what it really means to you, like, beyond just being a woman in that industry and now being a woman captain owning a boat, like, what it all, like, really kinda means to you on a deeper level.
Yeah, and alright, so just to address kind of females in the fishery, it is a very male-dominated, um, area, work industry, and going up there as a 21-year-old, there were, like, maybe 3 or 4 OG badass women, who had boats, and these are women who started back in, like, the '70s
Mhm.
or whatnot and have fished up there for decades. Um, but we're talking just to give some numbers, I mean, there were maybe 3 or 4 female skippers when I first started out of 1,000, 1,400 boats-ish.
Wow.
Just to give some numbers there. So, for example, the yard, all the boats are up on land, dry docked, and we call it the yard. So you start out your season doing a lot of boat work, working on land, getting all the gear ready, getting the boat ready, and in a place called the yard. The yard didn't have like women's restrooms or bathrooms. So, like, I just went to the bathroom in the dude's bathroom. I guess just things like that
Mhm.
that sort
Yeah.
of make you realize that you're a minority. And I think it was intimidating. Like, I felt the fact that I was female, but I have to say I usually just didn't give a shit. I don't hold being a female or my identity as a female as like my most defining characteristic. And for me, there was um just I did have more reserve and things like that or felt awkward, but I don't know that it's necessarily because I was female. I want to say it's because I was young and didn't know what the heck I was getting into, right? Like I really didn't know anything. And for me, that rolls over into I identify way more strongly as being a first generation fisher person and not having like going into an industry or a world where I didn't have a parent or a cousin or a brother or, like there's no, I didn't know anybody except for, maybe my friend who got me up there. And that I think is so much more intimidating.
Mhm.
To me, that was much more intimidating than the fact that I was female.
Yeah. I like that perspective a lot because I too, for a very, very long time throughout my life, did a lot of things that were more on the male-dominated side, and I never kinda just had blinders on and just did it because I wanted to do it without thinking like, "Oh, am I gonna be the only girl?" or I have more to
Totally.
prove because 'cause I'm a woman or something, but more on the aspect of, like, well, I feel like I have more to prove because, yeah, I'm, like, new in this or I didn't just get, like, grandfathered into it or whatever, and I think that's important to have too because, like I said, I want any women out there to go do the thing that they might be maybe afraid to do or afraid to try because they're a woman. Because I know so many more people out there might have that because 'cause they've been told that for a long time, that you can't do something because 'cause you're a woman. I think there's more of that story told than not, but I think that we also have to sometimes just to not let that be, like you said, your defining characteristic of doing the thing.
Yeah, I mean, there are just so many different types of minorities, right? And you could I think we chatted just before this podcast and talking about if you're the first generation to go to college, if you're the first
Mhm,
generation to own a home, do any of these big life things and you don't have this core mentorship group helping you. It doesn't matter if you're female or male or somewhere in between or, or gay or any of these things, right? Like these are really scary things to confront because you are the new front. You're approaching the new frontier. You're the first
mhm.
generation. And I just think that confining my experience to being female cuts out the fact that I can relate very well to other young males or people who had adverse backgrounds, and their struggles of getting into something like this, or people that didn't come from good finances and trying to navigate how to buy a boat, right? Like,
Yeah.
they struggle a lot, and I could just continue to hold on to this fact that I'm female, but I'm gonna miss the fact that I am really related to a large group of people who are trying to figure this out and get in here for the first time and don't have huge backup resources to count on.
So speaking of that, navigating these things that you don't have any real close ties to, so you don't have someone to look up to, how to get started, how to buy your own boat, how to do all of this. How did you start to once it got in your mind of like, I want to have my own boat and get out there and do this instead of just work for someone else? I'm sure by this time you had some relationships and connections and things up there, but how did it affect you in that, like, being at that first generation fisher person?
Yeah, so I guess I wanna speak a little bit to how incredible it is that Bristol Bay as a fishery is built to allow first generation people to enter, right? And I think that we hear the story so often, of I'm a third generation fisherman or fourth generation fisherman, and there's a lot of pride in that, and
Mhm.
that's beautiful. But I think we're missing this huge chunk of how incredible it is that there's an industry, that people get into without having those ties. Like, it is the American dream to be able to get into an industry like this and be able to make a living, from the bottom up, and the fact that it's not bought out by these massive corporations. Bristol Bay has a lot of rules and regulations to maintain that status because how easy would it be for some massive company to come in, buy all the boats, and then just collect all the fishing proceeds, right?
Mhm.
So there are a lot of rules and regulations to help maintain the fishery in a way that people like me, first generation, can enter it. So I just wanna speak to that and say how incredible it is.
I mean,
And then
that's
as far
awesome to
Yeah,
hear. Sorry to interrupt, just because
yeah.
I'm having some familiarity with the industry. Even so, like, I feel like it can definitely be harder for people, like, first generation of anything because of, the permitting and how little I mean, I wasn't in Bristol Bay, so I don't know how much it differs there, but, like, that's what always seemed to be the roadblock, from people that I heard was, like, being able to get that permit because those are grandfathered or someone's selling them and they're so limited, and having some family ties definitely helps. I mean, I think anywhere, any industry, right? The more people you know, like, sometimes the easier things can be, but still to point out that it is a industry in place where there's a lot of resources for those who aren't is awesome to hear.
Yeah, and the permitting is, since you mentioned it, it is very difficult to be able to fish in an Alaskan fishery, right? You do need a boat and you need a permit, and the permit costs as much as your boat sometimes. Like, so it's like this huge asset that you need to buy. And I mean, to be completely honest, it is very difficult to get a permit. A lot of times they are passed down through generations. There's a few, like, small agricultural banks that will loan on permits. Um, I actually became an Alaskan resident, partially so I could get a loan to get a permit. So, I mean, it was a pretty major life thing to be able to move, to move myself up here so that I could get a loan to get this permit. There are other ways to do it though, like
Yeah.
with some creativity. But, um, no, I mean, I think everyone who is coming in first generation and needs to buy all their own stuff, first of all, it is probably the biggest thing anybody will ever do. Like, it's around a $500,000, like, $500,000 startup, and, we talked about being a ski bum. I definitely didn't have anything close to that or, like, even a fraction of that. I remember going to the bank to get a loan or, to, like, ask about getting a loan. I'm, like, 26 or something, and they kinda look at me, I maybe made, like, 25 grand or 30 grand. Like, and they're like, wait, what do you do for work?" I'm like, "Well, I waitress here, and then I also work this, and I do my commercial fishing stuff," and they're like, "Yeah, no." Um, so the community really came together for me. Like, I ended up I got a little money from my mom. She gave me, like, a $50,000 loan, so I'm still paying that back. And then the guy that I was buying the boat from ended up owner financing me almost $100,000. I You work for a cannery where you deliver all your fish, and they gave me, like, a $40,000 startup loan. And then, I mean, I literally just asked everybody I knew for I was like, "Hey, do you have, like" you know, family I used to work with at the restaurant, "Do you have 10 grand you wanna invest? Like, for the summer, I'll pay it back," and so I had this little conglomerate of just awesome, amazing people in my life who maybe gave me 10 grand or 15 or, and let me tell you, that first season, I didn't take home a dime, like, everything went back to paying everybody back, but it was a really cool thing to completely put yourself out there for something you think you can do and have the community support you. Within the fishery, there's a lot of resources, and then also outside the fishery, like asking just anybody in your life.
That's so
Um,
cool that you, like, literally, community crowdfunded, not
yeah.
Kickstartering some product, but, like, out there asking, and I'm sure that did you feel pretty stressed that first season in, like, how the fishing
Oh,
might go to be able to do this, and then wondering, like, "Okay, well, the whole idea here was to be able to fund a winter, so what's this winter gonna look like, and can I do this again next year?"
well, my first season owning my boat was COVID. And so the stress was unreal because we didn't even know if the fishery was gonna open, right? Like, I had
Yeah.
literally like, I closed on this boat in March. Like,
Oh,
right during the outbreak, and then there's all this speculation about how the fishery is not gonna operate and, you know, prices are just gonna be and once we knew we were gonna operate, the price was essentially just gonna be tanked, and so, yeah, talk about stress. I mean, that first season don't get me wrong, I pretty much cry in the middle of every season at some point,
yeah,
like,
yeah, of course.
but
To be expected.
yeah, but the first season, I mean, I remember just being like, "How am I gonna make this? Like, I can't, I'm not gonna be able to make this," and everything ends up working out, and you do. It's a really short season. Sometimes you'll get as much as 40, 50% of your fish in 3 or 4 days, which is crazy, but it means that your equipment needs to be operating, your crew needs to be healthy. I mean, there's just so many spaces for error that will could cost the operation 30 grand in a day, right? Like, it's really high consequence, um, of breaking down in the
Yeah.
middle of a season. Like, you wanna be able to everything has to be working. And I guess kinda to speak to that, like, that is another amazing part of the community and that when you get up there, you have a radio group that you work with throughout the season, and these are people who are on other boats, and you're talking to them about everything, right? So you're running your mechanical issues past these people in your radio group. You are looking for fish with them. You are each other's backup. Like if something goes wrong and people need help, like this is you're here to support everybody. And that yeah, just as far as having support and mentorship and whatever else, I love the concept of the radio group and a lot of my friends I'm in a radio group with a lot of young people who don't have family or big ties, and that's I don't know, it's really cool to be able to grow with people and you're all figuring it out together, and, it's a really cool feeling.
I feel like that's also something that is missing a lot today too, is that real sense and connection of community, right? And so being somewhere like that where you really do rely on other people and you know that you have other people there is something that a lot of people don't really have anymore. Again, we live in bubbles. Obviously, you up there in the summer and then in a ski community in the winter where we can feel more of that community like connection because you're surrounded by people who have similar interests or similar goals and whatnot. But in the kind of general public or everyday life, I feel like that is, like I said, a large part of what's missing in the day to day for people is that sense of community at all, and like humans helping each other because we're so against each other
Yeah,
right now in so many things that it's like just so nice to remember that that stuff does exist. Me when I was up there and I worked on a tender, we were definitely, like, the support boat for sure because we were
yeah,
the ones making our boat didn't run to town much because it's very old and big and slow, and so it was like a 12-hour, drive to Juneau, but there was faster tenders that would come to us, and they ran for us, and so for parts or anything, or if boats could limp out to us, they tie to us, and my captain was like, just could fix anything almost, so he's always on other people's boats helping them with mechanical problems or taking the skiff out to them to help them out because it wasn't, I'm sure there it is also competitiveness to fishing during certain times of the year and whatnot, or protecting your spots or this, that, and the other, but largely more so it's that helping each other out because 'cause you're all out there trying to do the same thing, make a living, and, with something that you really love and have so much more of a connection than just the money. Most people who are up there year after year for decades, it's not just about that, right? They have that true soul connection to what Alaska is.
yeah, wow, that was a really beautiful way to say all that and to put it, no, I think you nailed it. It is, yeah, it is competitive, but it's there's something that's so much higher and bigger than that, and that is, um, being there for other people's safety and just supporting we're all fishermen, right? We've all chosen to be out there and be doing this, and there's that, like, much deeper, bigger connection that we're all gonna be you're gonna help somebody, if they need it. Like, it is life or death. I mean, it sounds
Yeah.
dramatic, but it like, there could be very serious moments, and you just have to help. Like, it doesn't matter
Mhm.
if you know them, if you don't know them. Um, yeah, it's
Yeah.
but yeah,
Comes
so
down to
that's what
being
I said.
human.
Yeah, yeah, and it is really you're thrown into this thing, where it is unpredictable. It is like you wake up every day and you don't know what's gonna happen. And
Mhm.
that is something that's a really crazy feeling to live with. I think a lot of us think that we have a lot of control over our lives or think that we're going to have it's gonna be like this or my season is gonna be like this or whatever. And I just feel like the fishery is a really good example of you go in there with fists raised and fighting, and you just don't know what's gonna happen that day. And
Yeah, you're at the
it's
mercy of so much.
you're at the mercy of so much. The sea, mechanically, your boat, it just yeah, so much. And it's a really it's a really powerful thing to feel, and to realize and be humbled by.
Yeah, well, and like we, kinda touched on, I think it's so huge to have those things in life that can make you realize, and appreciate other parts of your life, which again, that adversity that people aren't up against so much anymore and just kind of skate through life complacent and it's like, no, like, you gotta have the highs or the lows to experience the highs,
Yeah,
that whole
yeah,
cliche
for
too.
sure.
But so looking at what's going on today, I mean, you don't only have your boat and fishing, but you've created another business out of it, with Salty Debbie's. Will you tell people like what you're doing with Salty Debbie's and how they might be able to connect with you for this upcoming season?
Yeah, okay. So Salty Debbie's is my seafood distribution company, and it's not a new concept by any means. But part of what the fishery does is we each individual boat owner works with a cannery, right? So you deliver your fish to a processing center on shore, and essentially you sell your fish to them, and they process it all, and then they're the ones that are marketing it across the globe, wherever else. The fishery that or the cannery that I work for called Leader Creek Fisheries has a buyback program for their fleet where we can purchase salmon that's been processed back from them and then sell it to direct to consumer. So all my fish I give it off to the cannery. They process it all, they package it in all the fancy USDA approved, you know, vacuum pack, and then they barge it down to Seattle, and I buy back a small portion of it, and so this will be a portion of the fleet's best fish. So it's some of mine, but it's also my friends who work with Leader Creek. I buy back a portion of the fillets, and then I drive around some areas of the lower 48, in the fall and sell. And part of this, program was sort of put together, to help, I think, just add another aspect or component to for fishermen. The industry is so volatile. You just never know what you're gonna get paid every year. Like, you don't know what you're gonna make. And so having, like, a little bit of a sales program on the side, just a little extra side cash, maybe, a little more stability of what you are in control of. And yeah, mine is called Salty Debbie's because my boat's name is called the Deborah. So, my business is named after my boat. And yeah, it's been a fun way to reconnect with everybody and share a little bit of Bristol Bay and why I think the fishery is so amazing with people and also give people the best literally the best fish, sushi grade, pin boned, that they can be eating. So
That's what I think is so cool about that. I was in the trolling industry, and so there was freezer boats, a lot of boats out there who processed it everything like their own and would bring that home. And yeah, throughout the summers, whatever, have their farmers markets or websites sell it in many different ways. But what I love about people doing that is the education too that it can provide people of what the fishery is and like to support it, because you also hear a lot of things of fishing's bad and this and that because what you think
Yeah,
of is, like, not even the purse seining, but, like, the trawlers out there in Asia
yeah,
and stuff that are just scooping up everything, right? And so that's what people hear of, and that's what people think commercial fishing is in general, and it's very important that they know that it's not, to protect the fishery and the region and all of it. So I think when the fishermen can do something like what you're doing with Salty Debbie's and get actually out into their communities and educate people is huge to help support the fisheries in general, in Alaska, and like I said, that whole ecosystem and environment, especially when you have, like, issues with farm fish and all that, like, let's learn a
yeah.
little bit because again, people don't do that because their algorithm only shows them one thing if they watched a video, right? So now they think everything involved in this is bad, so I think that's huge, and when you in the very beginning were talking about your experience, like, at Mount Hood and working in, like, if one of the first gigs being, like, being the salt bitch, all I thought about Salty Debbie's immediately. I was like, "Here it comes full circle, like, you've been a salty
Oh my
bitch, like, since the beginning, huh?"
oh my
Like
god, I'm gonna add that into my, into my Govy story. That's hilarious, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Throwing salt to just being covered in salt, just all around
oh my
you,
god,
so
yeah. Oh, that's
well
so funny. Yeah.
Well, tell everyone where they can find you, follow along, like, on your personal Instagram, Salty Debbies, all that, to watch you fish, watch you ski, and support any way they can in what you're doing.
Yeah, so, I mean, I've got a personal Instagram, which is Keree.Smith, and then my Salty Debbie Instagram, I think it's just Salty Debbie or salty.debbie. Put it
They
in the
know
notes.
where to find it, I'll link it.
Yeah, yeah, and I also have a website, saltydebbie.com, Debby, is how you spell Debbie, and I do these fish drops, so I do full fillets of sockeye as well as portions, and then I just started selling a small amount of halibut and black cod as well, which is incredible if you haven't had it. But I try to do pre-orders and then I drive around and do drops in specific locations throughout November. So through November and then some in the spring. But you can go follow along, sign up for my newsletter, and get all the information if I'm coming to an area near you.
Awesome, I love it, and thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story of getting involved up there in Alaska and just creating this lifestyle for yourself that supports what you want to do and where your passions are in the winter. We could have definitely gone on about just so many things, I think, in the connections between these 2, like, seemingly very different, like, lifestyles, but I think we did cover a good base in it for sure, and if anyone out there is interested in kinda diving into what that looks like in the summer and fishing, like Carrie said, Bristol Bay supportive of that, and there's a lot of ways you can get involved and get on a boat and just kinda see if that's for you. I definitely, if you're a little bit older, you might wanna get some mobility going.
Huge stretches, yeah, you're stretches.
It's definitely not easy, but hey, I don't think you're too old for anything, so don't let
Well,
that
yeah,
stop you,
right,
that's
yeah,
for sure.
absolutely, cool. Well, no, it's been great talking with you, and, yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Thanks for
thanks
having me.
everybody. Yes, thank you, and thanks everyone out there for listening. Check the show notes to follow Carrie and Salty Debbie's and all that fun stuff, and if you don't know, then maybe you'll learn a little bit more, like I said, about the commercial fishing industry and Bristol Bay, gill netting, all those things. So we will talk to you all next week.